NHL draft or NHL free agency? Both are this week. If you had your choice, if you could only spend one day in front of the TV, what would it be? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. Steve Milton, freshly back from the cottage, dried off from the cottage. Which one is it? You get to choose one. You can sit in front of the TV to watch the draft or to watch the NHL free agency open up. Which one is it?
Free agency. Just because you know the players a little more. There could be more of them. There really isn't much interest in the draft after the first 3 or 4 people in terms of it. It's nice to update your information on who the people are. I find that the trades around the draft are a little bit intriguing, but basically free agency for me. I know the players, and I think most of us know them too. And so you can see a team trying to rebuild and where it may be going.
Rick?
Yeah, the draft is interesting if there are trades and moves and draft picks are dealt, but the impact and certainly the interest, I think, is overwhelmingly in favor of free agency because fans know who these guys are, they've seen them play, and once they join their teams or they leave their teams, the impact is that much greater. So free agency for sure.
Bubs?
I think that free agency, I have to go there because I think we've never seen a more interesting time of free agency due to the COVID-19 pausing of the season and where we are, and the fact that we don't know how long that this break is going to be. I mean, I think we're all suspecting that the season is going to return sometime in the middle of January. But I would think that right now, general managers, especially based on the results of last season, are under a lot of stress and under a lot of pressure to revamp their teams in some unusual circumstances. Whereas I think the draft, we kind of had a long time to really know who's going to go number 1 or 2 or 3. So I'm leaning more towards free agency because I think teams have more question marks at repacking their rosters as compared to loading them up with kids.
All right, so I'll go against the grain here for 2 reasons. One, because the free agency year after year after year comes with all the hype and then ends up being about generally fourth-line grinders who are deep depth players who get signed, and then the guys on TV have to talk about them for hours on end. There's almost never, I mean, with a few exceptions, stretches of interest for people. There really aren't. And the other part is this year, especially with the salary cap being flat, with teams not having a lot of space, I have no idea whether there's even going to be all that much real interesting movement in free agency. And at least with the draft, you might get some trades because it's a way you can do it without a lot of money changing hands, and you can change your roster that way. So I think this year anyway, I think the draft becomes the much more interesting place.
Well, I think the free agency, I like Rick's point when he said that there are 2 teams involved in each free agency move, and that's the nice thing about it. It gives you a double whammy there because you can analyze the whole and you can analyze sort of what holes are being plugged. And then, of course, there's that whole thing. And I think I agree with your principle here, Scott, in that everybody reaching the salary cap, but it's quite interesting on how and who. Then you get a third set of speculation: the hole that's left, where they're going to, and what's the team going to do? Who are they going to get rid of to make this? Because they don't have to make the salary cap right now, right? They can do it over time. So the idea is now you start speculating how are they going to fit this person? I mean, the Leafs are a really good example of that.
I think that's exactly the point why I like free agency is because of the salary cap with it. There could be a situation where with the salary cap not having any movement, where teams are going to try and buckle down from where they are because so many teams are at the max or, approaching it. Because I think at the end, the uncertainty of how many people you can get into stadiums, how much money can be earned for the franchise, is that you're going to see a lot of teams kind of trying to back off salaries. Now, we can't stop by who's become free agent or not. So there's a lot of free agents out there. We've already seen some signings. We've already seen some players already on the move with some trades, which kind of surprised me because we don't really know what that hardcore cap number is going to be. So I think that's why there's more intrigue right now. And of course, regardless of all the stuff that's going on, whether you have a lower cap or a higher cap or a flat cap, you have to win. So these general managers, to me, are under a tremendous amount of stress and pressure.
And there's very, you can count on one hand the number of players in this draft at least that are going to jump into their team right away. Lafreniere obviously is going to be one of those guys, but there might be 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 guys who are going to jump into the lineup and be impactful guys. It's, apart from the generational guys, then I know we've used that term more often than not over the last number of years. But when you're talking about free agent, Alex Pietrangelo, if he leaves the St. Louis Blues, he's going to have a major impact on the team that he joins. The draft used to be great. It used to be a lot more active in terms of trades and whatnot. We're not seeing a lot of that, and that's why I give the edge again to free agency.
And again, the free agency thing, for that very reason, you mentioned Pietrangelo. It's a name I always get tied off on my tongue. I don't know why. It's the spelling or something. Anyway, if you just spelled the Peter Angelo, I would have it anyway.
Imagine his thing. He's got to use it every day of his life.
I know.
That must be for him.
The thing, he's a classic example for me of the free agency ridiculousness. Is he one of the top 5 defensemen in the NHL? No.
I think so.
No, he's not one of the top 5. He's never had more than, I think, was it 3 Norris Trophy votes in a season, something like that. Like maybe my number is low. He's a good defenseman. He's probably a top 4 defenseman, but it's free agency. So of course, because he's available in this hype world, he vaults to the very top. He's suddenly now Nicholas Lidstrom or something.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I can't appreciate the way you're judging defensemen. And the Norris Trophy defenseman is always who finishes the highest points. And that, to me, especially when you look talking, well, let's make it home relative. We're talking about the Maple Leafs right now. Alex Pietrangelo is a defensive defenseman, left, right-hand shot. The perfect thing of what the Leafs and many teams need is that right-hand shot, big, tall, strong body, physical, leader type. I mean, as a captain, right? So let's not always pigeonhole a defenseman as a guy who's going to have 80, 90, 80, 60, 70, 80 points, right? I think in terms of defensive defensemen, that's why I think Alex Pietrangelo is one of the top 5 defensemen and has been for a very, very long time. And we saw it in that Stanley Cup run, how valuable that guy is. Even this year, we saw how strong that guy can be.
Yeah, look, I'm not arguing that he's not a good defenseman. I'm simply saying for the $9 million or whatever it is that they're talking about, because he's a free agent, that his value has been hyped beyond where he really is. And so, the free agency makes guys into superheroes that may be very good players, but Steve, I don't think that a lot of the guys who we find on the free agency market are as good as the hype because they're available.
Well, and some are better. If you go a little down the scale, maybe he's not a top 5 guy, but what he is an impact guy, and he is very definitely a top 5 player. That one of the things that we say, he's a $9 million player. He's only a $9 million player if he gets $9 million.
Right.
So who's he worth $9 million to? Somebody who's almost there. Let's suppose Leafs had $9 million. He's worth it to the Leafs. He is worth $9 million to the Leafs because they can't get there, right? They can't get to where they need to be without it. Somebody who's further down the pack, he's not worth half that to them.
Well, wait a second. Maybe he's worth $9 million. Look at John Tavares. John Tavares was a guy who, was worth, what was it, 11 million, 12, 13, whatever it was. Has John Tavares, because of the money that he's being paid, has he earned with the Leafs the money that he's being paid? He's been a good player.
Well, I think the first year he did fine. It's hard to judge off this year, but they already had stuff there. I think everybody said at the time, why wouldn't you go get a defenseman? And because we can get this guy who's as good as there is, roughly.
Theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically.
And they're still saying that.
Yeah, and people are still saying that. Why didn't they go get that? And if they could make that deal or go for, if it was this year and the 2 were available, there's no doubt who they would go for. That's the difference there. They've got Morgan Riley and then a bunch of guys named 4, right? So, and maybe. Maybe they develop, and maybe he creates an updraft. That's the other thing that a guy like him would do for the Leafs or other teams like that. But it's a limited number that get for him. I think one of the things that flattens the argument of those of us to say free agency more than the draft is that there are a lot of people, if they don't jump the first day, they're going to hold out, because what is the market going to be? We saw that in baseball. Suddenly, there's a whole bunch of players that think they're going to get 4 or 3.8 that are going to get 2.8, 1.9, that kind of thing, but they won't know yet, and they don't want to make that commitment on the first day. Some will. And I think that's the kind of player the teams that are going to win the cup next year are going to grab right now, is the player that realizes, Jesus, this thing's going to end up here at 1-8 for me. I'm going to take the shot here on a 1-year deal. Happened in baseball, and it's happened to a few players in hockey last year too.
And there's a million storylines on draft day too. You know, where these guys come from, you know, their situation at home, you know, maybe they had some adversity they had to deal with, or, you know, there's a family member that was, you know, diagnosed with cancer. We always hear these, you know, kind of sob stories and, you know, reclamation projects. And that's just, you know, the fact of the draft. Yeah, after the first night though, I mean, what kind of interest, if your team doesn't have a draft pick in the first round, what kind of interest is there to continue on with the draft? With free agency, day number 1 is so exciting because there might be a big name that goes off the board. But if he doesn't, that storyline continues for 2, 3, 4, 5 days.
There's not too many wah-wah stories in the NHL. I mean,
There's a couple here and there.
Not bad. This is not
There's always a couple.
NHL. This is not. I mean, this is Canada. Come on. These guys have lived overall pretty gifted lives. I'm not saying there's not some, but this isn't the NFL or the NBA.
I think you're confusing this with America's Got Talent. where every singer has to have recovered from leprosy while their mother died from being hit by a bus. And look, I would, one thing I would love to see, and again, you know, we always throw these things out here as ways, not ways necessarily that better the system, make things more interesting. I would love to see with free agency for the NHL, just for the interest, for the entertainment value, that all the buyouts that you do, because teams can now buy players out, make you announce the buyouts right before the draft starts. So they all get announced that day as well. Because Steve, you're talking about, Rick, you're talking about how you've got the impact of the coming and the going. Let's have that as part of the thing. And so 2 hours before the draft starts, here's our announcement of which players are now on the market. Now, it's not going to happen, I understand. But I'm talking about, again, as ways to make this really interesting. You can't do it because you're throwing guys' lives into.
Well, yeah, that's right. And you're going to carry more. You're going to carry above the salary cap until you can make those decisions too.
I understand. I understand why it doesn't work. I'm simply saying from an entertainment and an interest perspective, how you could really ramp up the interest now. Because suddenly, let's say the Leafs buy out player X. What are they doing? Why are they getting rid of him? What are they trying to save their money for? You now have this built-up interest that I think would help. But you know what? Again, that's TV coming out rather than running a hockey team.
Well, that's true, but you're right. I mean, the thing is about grabbing attention, and they're trying to grab it in ways that are almost a little bit manufactured, and that comes from the analysis. So that'd be guys like here, guys that are a little maybe closer to the action, the quote-unquote insiders saying, here's probably what they're going to do to accommodate that, right? So, and then that becomes semi-fact after that, right? But that's still kind of an insider thing. I'm not sure that spreads the game. I don't think either of these things is going to spread the game. Maybe within the already fans, let's say in Ottawa, if they really score big here with their 3 picks by analysts' view, maybe it gets some people back that used to. But I don't think you're going to get any non-hockey fans at all interested in this, and you can't expect to.
Well, because there's not a Connor McDavid.
Yeah, that's right, exactly right.
And I think that's why the free agent thing is a bigger thing, because you have the average fan of a team, not so much of the Maple Leafs or any of the top Canadian teams. You could talk about even the Carolina Hurricanes, right? You're not going to sit there as a Carolina Hurricane fan and say, yeah, I'm so happy who we got in the second round, 24th overall. Like the average fan in Raleigh doesn't know that. But they do know that whoever they pick up in free agency is going to, even if it's a second line guy, they're going to be like, oh, we know him. We've seen him play. We can watch video of him. It gets just so much easier to identify who your team's going to pick up as an impact player through free agency, because every team generally makes one kind of splash, whether it's a defenseman, a goaltender, or a forward, we don't know. But I feel like in free agency, especially this year, every team will make at least one move that you'll either like be shocked with or open your eye with, because you'll be, as a fan, you'll be happy that your team was improved or made a move that you didn't like.
The added wrinkle too is the price tag. You know, we just mentioned John Tavares, $11 million. You know, Alex Pietrangelo gets $9 million. There's going to be fans saying, no way, that's way too much. Others thinking, you know, that team got a steal of a deal or whatever the case is. The added wrinkle is money. The draft, hey, you're on your rookie contract and that's it.
The thing I'll be watching closely, I think, not closely, but sort of looking for ripples towards, is what happens with the goalies here. Right? Because it seems that that's where a lot of the stress point in this entire free agency thing and building the rosters next year is going to come down to, is the goalie situation.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them available this year. Well, and you know what? You could theoretically, and I've argued this for a long time, and I know you guys have too, to win a cup, you don't need to have the best goalie in the NHL. You need to have the hottest goalie in the NHL. And there are guys who are available on the free agent market this year who are capable of doing it because they've done it before. You've got, what's his name from Washington, who's going to be
Holtby.
You've got Marc-Andre Fleury, who may be there. You've got other guys who have shown they can do this. And you, if you're a GM, not to overstate it, and maybe to your guys' point, you could win a Stanley Cup if you're a team that needs a goalie and you make the right choice and the guy happens to get hot when the playoffs roll around.
You may want two of them, and you may be able to, let's see where it goes. If there's so many available, you may be able to afford it because teams are going to cut things on there, except for the teams that have the big number of goalies. And if we look at it, I don't have the stats in front of me, but if you take the finalists, let's say over the last 5 years, the last 10 finalists, I'm not sure one goalie on maybe one or two teams has played every game in the Stanley Cup. You know, and some that won the cup were not the starters when the playoffs started, or some that reached the finals at least.
Oh,
so,
Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh
Pittsburgh,
example.
for sure.
Look what would have happened if Dallas won. Anton Hudobin was a guy that was nowhere near the starter's job, got thrown into it due to injury, and there was just no way they could have ever gone back to Ben Bishop. So, I mean, you're right. If this guy
do those, is what I'm saying.
If this guy was a free agent this year, this guy could have totally maxed out because he would have been the Conn Smythe Trophy winner had Dallas won the Stanley Cup this year.
And you know what's so hilarious?
The goalies down. I think it's going to drive, all of this is going to drive the prices in general of goalies down.
I think so too. I think goalies are going to be like the running backs of the NFL, devalued, not drafted high, not given a lot of money. I think those 10-year, $10 million contracts are going to be very few and far between because GMs are looking at what other teams are doing with a 1A and a 1B, and we're not going to pay either of them anywhere close to $5 million plus, and they're still victorious. They're still successful.
And that is always surprising to me, always hilarious to me. Look at the goalies who have gone in the first round the last few times, and it's not often. I mean, Carey Price was third overall, I think. Marc-Andre Fleury was first overall, and Rick DiPietro went right near the top. Out of those three, two of them were at one time or another considered the best goalie in the world. And there's a Russian guy who is being talked about as a first rounder this year, but people are saying, oh, you can't take a goalie. If you're saying a goalie in modern hockey is the most important position on the ice, and I think that's a very fair statement, and there's a guy who you look at and say, this guy could be a Carey Price or could be a game changer. It's always amazing to me that teams are so scared to touch those guys just because. If that's the guy that can make you win, man, oh man, it seems like one of those things that you wonder about what they're thinking when they won't touch them.
That's, I mean, Philly, and they looked at their guy got a slow start and then became the guy. But I think it's pretty hard for to be a one-man show anymore. Just because the game, and we've talked about this a lot on this show, is East-West, right? And it's hard to keep up with that through a whole season and the playoffs and the next year and the next year and the next year after that. So you usually need some kind of break, or you need some kind of rejuvenation, or you need something because they get onto you in a hurry.
To your point, Scott, I don't think goaltenders sell tickets either, right? They don't put the puck in the net.
Not many. I'm sure Carey Price sells some tickets in Montreal, but not many.
Yeah, there's just not many of those guys. And even if you have a spectacular, look at Andrei Vasilevsky. I mean, this guy has been one of the top goaltenders ever since being drafted. And we saw him, I think, multiple times at the World Juniors as a goaltender for Team Russia. So Tampa Bay knew they were onto something when they picked up this guy, and that they were going to find the guy that's going to be in their net for maybe the next decade, which I can't see that changing at this point. But again, people don't run to Amalie Arena to see Andrei Vasilevsky play.
Except in Florida. Except when Javi Bulin went to Florida, Sunrise, the arena was full every single night.
That's true. Yeah.
Not exactly.
That's true.
Not exactly. There was nobody there.
They were lined up to Boca Raton
No, but hold on, guys. Give them their due. I mean, you're talking. The Panthers are one thing, but when Happy Boolin went to the Lightning, they've always done well with attendance, right? That's never been an issue. And he's the guy that wins the Stanley Cup with that franchise. I mean, that franchise has always been doing it
Tampa's
right.
a good franchise.
It's South Florida where they struggle, and I would claim to you, just because I've been there to that rink twice, and I've been to the area and talked to a lot of their fans there. We see it with Ottawa. It's got a lot to do with location. Yeah. Because where that rink is it's not even Miami where that rink is. They should be sharing the facility with the Miami Heat if they wanted to make waves, but they went for the cheaper option.
Well, they went a great comparison to Ottawa, but because it was the same deal. It was a real estate play. Yeah. And of course, a lot of the NHL rinks today are real estate plays. Some work Arizona, real estate play, right?
What we're hoping is that somehow in this draft that some team will pull an early Buffalo Sabres maneuver and hire draft Japan's number one prospect that doesn't exist and sends all the media scrambling to try and find out about, what was his name, Yosh something or other, back in like 1969 or whatever it was. When did the Buffalo Sabres make that pick? Go look it up. Look up the Buffalo Sabres Japanese draft. They picked a guy that didn't exist, made up a name. I think it was Punch Imlach. One of the great draft pranks of all time. I don't think you make pranks in the draft anymore.
No.
Which one would you be watching this?
Sorry, Scott. Or maybe they do what the Ottawa Rough Riders did back in, like, what was that, 88?
Yeah.
That's a dead guy.
Draft a dead guy? Wasn't that Mel Bridgman? Didn't he do that with the Ottawa Senators?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the Ottawa had one too, yeah. So.
Yeah.
What are you watching if you're watching one this week? You only get to choose one. Is it the draft or is it free agency? Let us know. Our Twitter handles are on the screen. You can reach out to us. They'll be up again as well. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.